Just after the beginning of this year, just as the new year started, Southern California was on fire. Literally, parts of Los Angeles, neighborhoods burned to the ground. These ferocious fires took over. More than 24 people are known to have lost their lives, and the survivors are really left to pick up the pieces, losing neighborhoods and so much that has been familiar to them. Joining me right now, I have Taiann Knetge. She is from the Eaton Fire area. First of all, take us back to that day when things started to happen. Did you have any idea that there was a threat?
No, I woke up that morning and I took my daughter to daycare and I looked around and I noticed, trees were down, all the palm fronds in the neighborhood were down, and that's when I realized it was the Santa Ana winds.
Of course, Santa Ana winds, for those who don't know, are very hot, dry winds that blow across Southern California. They come out of the deserts of Nevada and Utah. High pressure sort of battles up against low pressure, and you get these strong winds coming across the desert. And if you're from SoCal, you know that these winds can be destructive. And if there is any sort of ignition, any sort of flame, it can very quickly grow into a awful wildfire. So the Santa Anans were starting to kick up. Had you noticed that the winds were up?
Yeah, we noticed that the winds are up. I was kind of running around that day because I was getting ready to go on a cruise and a few days after that. And while I was out running errands, my sister sent me a picture of our tree at the beginning of our driveway had fallen into the power lines and was blocking her car in. So she couldn't get out of our driveway and we couldn't get in. So that was on the 7th before the fire even started in the morning.
So the winds had already gotten a little crazy, getting people's attention. And then if you're in a certain part of Southern California where there's a risk or there's a fire alert, do you get notified right away? How does your neighborhood or your family get notified for a fire alert?
So the interesting thing is that we actually never got notified. If our side of the neighborhood was on the west side of Altadena, and so we never got notified at all, even to evacuate until the next day when the neighborhood was already on fire.
Wow, it happened that fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you went to bed at night, and then the next morning, is that when you knew something was terribly wrong?
That night I knew something was terribly wrong because I was driving home. Like I said, I was out and about running errands. I was driving home. I already knew that I couldn't get in my driveway because it was blocked by the tree. And I looked up to the mountains and I couldn't tell if one of the famous places in Altadena is Christmas Tree Lane. And it looked like Christmas Tree Lane was on fire. And so me and my husband and my daughter kind of went home. We didn't have any power and the flames looked like they were coming closer. And because my driveway was already blocked off, we decided that we would evacuate right then. Even though they didn't give us any warning, we could see the flames. So we decided to evacuate then.
How terrifying. So you took what you could. I mean, if you don't have that much time, what do you take with you? Did you think, oh, we'll be able to come back, it'll be fine? Or were you in a panic to grab anything that you could?
Yeah, so the only things that we took with us were like the clothes on our back. I brought a change of clothes and pajamas for my daughter. And because we were going on this Disney cruise in 2 days, I was like, bring the passports just in case. Like, we don't want to, but we thought we were being like extra cautious and that we would be able to go back in the morning. I also called my dad, who did lose his home, and he lives about 4 blocks from us. And he was like, I'm asleep. Everything's fine. I'll see you in the morning, is basically what he said.
And your dad has lived in the same house, the same area for how long?
So the house has been in our family for 67 years, and he's lived in it all his life. I believe he's 59. I think he's 59.
Well, when you live in a place that long, if something like that's never happened, you almost think stuff like that doesn't happen here. Or you've seen the wildfires, but they've always been at a distance. Was that kind of his mentality? It's not going to happen to us?
Absolutely. This is not our first wildfire. And usually what happens is that the forest behind the residential areas catches fire. If you live closer to the actual mountain, then you might have evacuated or been a little bit more scared. But we live, a couple miles down from the mountain, so we didn't think that we were really in danger.
And so you take this precautionary step. Your dad's like, I'm staying put. How long until he was actually forced out?
He called me at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he told me, it's like hell up here. He
Wow.
said he opened up his front door and he was like, we have to get out. He grabbed 2 pairs of jeans. I believe he grabbed maybe the deed to his house and some of his childhood pictures, and he left. And my brother also lives with him, or lived with him, with his daughter who's 3 and his fiance. And they came down and met us in Pasadena, where we had evacuated to my grandparents' house.
That's awful. I mean, you're
Yeah.
leaving, you know that this is a bad situation. You take just the few things you can and race out. We've heard a lot of stories of people just maybe even going with only the clothes on their back to
Yeah.
get out and escape with their lives. When you talk about living in a place for that long, I can imagine that, you don't think it's going to happen, but then when you're actually in it, were you watching television saying, geez, the worst case scenario has actually happened? By the way, they call the Santa Ana winds the devil winds. So him comparing it to hell is on our doorstep is not far from the truth. These are really destructive, horrible winds.
Yeah. So we saw it. We were watching the news. But I was like, we don't have anything. Like, we don't have any clothes. We don't have anything. Let's see if we can go up to our house and grab a few things before we left, and before it's too late. And so we tried to get back to our house, and it was, first of all, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, so it was pitch black, and the smoke was so thick that it was like driving through a really heavy fog. And there was flames flying above our head and ambers being blown. And you could just drive, like, I drove past the cemetery was on fire. Houses were already on fire. And then the thing that kind of stopped us, where we were like, this isn't worth it, was we were driving and a Tesla was on fire right around the corner from our house. So as soon as we saw that, and we turned around and went back to Pasadena. But even in Pasadena, we were scared because we weren't that far from Altadena. And we saw people literally walking, because some people don't have cars, or their cars were trapped. So we saw people like walking down the street with backpacks and their dogs, and it was awful.
Yeah, truly a scene out of almost like the end of the world.
Yeah.
The images that were coming in as all this was happening in early January were so devastating and really shocking and jaw-dropping to watch. As you went through it and the days started to pass and you realized that this was a very large situation and there were multiple wildfires happening, what could you do to get information? What did you do just to kind of pass the time? I mean, you didn't end up going on vacation, did you?
I did go on vacation.
Oh, I'm so happy that you were able to still go.
I went because I have a small daughter, and I also have 3 nieces and nephews that, stay with me a lot of the time. And I wanted to get them out of that environment.
Lucky.
We also didn't really have anywhere else to go. So, you might as well spend time on a Disney cruise. So that was fun. But it wasn't that fun for the adults because we kind of had a constant stream. Right. We knew from our neighbor kind of sneaking back up to our house that our house hadn't burned. And my brother had actually took a video of my dad's house when it was on fire. And so we knew that my dad's house did burn. But it was kind of chaotic. There wasn't much information. It took a few days for the fires to be put out. And then even when they were put out, the gas wasn't put out. So there was gas flames still happening. So we didn't have access to a lot of information. And at first we kind of thought, since our home didn't burn, we'll be able to go home when we get off the cruise. And that kind of was proven wrong as soon as we landed back in LA.
Was that because of all the smoke damage and it
Yeah.
wasn't, yeah, viable? Yeah. I can
Yeah.
imagine that was awful. Once your dad found out that this home that had been in the family for 67 years had burned down, what was his response? I mean, I can't even imagine the emotion that's behind that.
My dad, I get emotional talking about it. My dad is such a positive person and such an amazing community member and neighbor and just a dad. And a few minutes after he found out his house burned, he posted on Facebook and said, "We're going to rebuild Dina strong. We're going to show the world how strong we are." So he has a really positive attitude about this all. He said he wanted to be the first one on the block to rebuild. Now he says he wants to be the first one in all of Altadena to rebuild. And I'm sure he'll do it too.
Oh, that's sweet. The resilient spirit really does make a difference, especially because some people can feel so hopeless after something like this happens. When you went back for the first time, when you guys were able to get some access, I'm sure you probably recorded it, but what was it like to see all of this devastation once the fires had calmed down and they gave you some of that access back? You think of all the family memories. It feels like everything's gone up in smoke.
Yeah. My aunts and uncles were married in that backyard, and I had my college graduation and my grad school graduation and my high school graduation party in that yard, and my baby shower and my daughter's birthday parties. And so just thinking about all the memories and all the holidays and all the family time together being lost was really heartbreaking. And also driving through the neighborhood and seeing when you live somewhere for so long, all the neighbors. They're like family. They come to all the parties at our house. And so seeing them devastated too, it's actually like nothing you've ever seen when an entire blocks are completely gone. Maybe one house is standing.
Yeah, like most people have been describing it like you're almost in a war zone or a movie set because it's almost that unbelievable to see this happen. For those who don't know, living in Southern California, insurance is a very iffy situation when it comes to natural disasters, and fire being one of them. Do you know anybody that had fire coverage in this area? I mean, the Eaton Fire zone in general is a place that would be at risk, but even if it's very hard to get insurance of any kind.
So both of me and my dad do have insurance.
Amazing.
So we're fortunate. However, it's not a straightforward process. For instance, I've already had 5 different claims adjusters in the less than a month that I've been since this has happened. And it's not straightforward on what they're going to cover, what they aren't going to cover. Thinking of an itemized list of your items when you don't have access to any of them it's really difficult. And then putting a price on pictures and things that you've lost, it's really hard. Yeah.
It's a tough situation to be in. When you guys went back, you were able to salvage some stuff, but you talk about your other family members and even your dad. Was he able to find anything in the rubble, in the dust, in the mess that was left behind?
The funny thing is, and I use humor to deal with pain. We were driving, along, and the only thing that was standing in the house was my niece's play structure, her slide and swing set. That thing, and I said, whoever is building those needs to build houses in Southern California.
Yeah, a little kiddie playhouse. Stands, all of that. That's incredible. Any other souvenirs or anything that you could find amongst everything, or was it just a heap of a mess?
It's a heap of a mess. It's ash. There's nothing there. I think he You have to be careful about going through the rubble because it's toxic. It's not like a forest fire where, it's natural things burning. But he did go through a few rooms and try to find, something. He really didn't find anything. He found like one statue, and he found a stepstone that my daughter made him right after she was born with her footprints in it that said grandpa.
Oh, that's sweet. That is a
Yeah.
very, at least
Yeah.
something sentimental coming out of it.
Yeah.
I know you'd said he was a big collector of Disney pins. You guys went on the Disney cruise.
Yeah.
That was, fun. Sounds like you're Disney fans.
Yeah.
Was he able to recover any of the pins that he had in his collection?
No, he wasn't. We went to the house, and that was one of the things that when I went up there with him, we were looking for is his different pin collections. And he didn't do it like as a professional where he just did it for fun and for joy. And he'd put them on his baseball caps and, his little lanyards and wear them when we went to Disneyland. Yeah.
Now that he doesn't have that, and you had said you'd reached out a little bit to social media to see if anybody maybe would kind of support the recovery process of losing so much of your, so many of your things, so many of the items that we have around us that bring us a little bit of joy, that bring us a little bit of comfort. And what happened when you did that, when you reached out?
So after that, I was kind of driving back to our where we're staying, and I was like, I can't take this. Like, we've got to see some good. And so I jumped on to this Facebook page called Disney Pins No Rules, Disney Pin Traders No Rules. And I kind of put a picture of him wearing his different hats and pins. And I said, my dad recently lost his house in the Eaton fire. He's such a wonderful person, and I'm wondering if there's anybody who would be willing to send him just an extra pin, like one pin that maybe you have a duplicate of. And I had like 50 people reach out to me right away, and I sent them my address, and then we started getting packages coming in, and I kind of collected them in a basket and was able to give him some. I still have more coming in, so it's really been exciting to see how much love there is in the world.
What have you given them to him yet, or is this going to be okay?
Yeah.
So, what was his response when he saw this?
He was blown away. He was very emotional, and he was very grateful for everyone. Just thinking about him and sending him a few little pins. Actually, one lady sent like 6 boards of pins. I was blown away by her generosity.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
This kind of gives him a little distraction, though. That's nice. I mean, it really is something that you can kind of use to lift your spirits. You mentioned how he's thinking, hey, I want to rebuild. I want to get in there. Is there any sort of time frame on anything like that? Even if you've got a long legacy of being in the neighborhood, 67 years, and you have this desire to get back and build back, what kind of road does that look like?
Well, I think that what we're finding out is there's a lot more questions than there are answers. He's in the insurance process. He filed for his claim the next day. And there's a lot of question on, the mortgage, and FEMA and, the city's getting, the city and the state and the federal government is getting involved in the cleanup process. So there's different dates that they said, I know that they're in phase 1 now, which is they're going through the neighborhood and they're taking out anything that's explosive, like toxic. So like the EV batteries and things like that. They said that's going to take a while, and then after that, they're going to start the debris removal. But they don't even have a place to put the debris yet.
And so just figuring out day to day where to stay and how to manage that, I can imagine there's a lot of costs. Not everybody is going to have a big support system. At least you guys have got your family here
Yeah.
to support each other. What are most people doing? They find themselves homeless. They find themselves trying to put things back together. That seems like an awful lot to take on.
Yeah. You know, there's the Red Cross has had set up a shelter at the Pasadena Convention Center, and I know that it's closing tomorrow. Or no, Saturday. It's closing Saturday the 8th. And so they're trying to find another shelter. There's about 300 people living there.
Wow.
And I know that there's also people living in Airbnbs and hotel rooms. We for the first couple weeks we're staying in an Airbnb. We had a really unfortunate experience at one of the Airbnbs, where we luckily got a refund, but it was very sketchy. And so people are, I feel for the people who don't have family to stay with. Luckily, we're staying in between, my cousin's house and my grandma's house, and my dad's staying with his partner.
You certainly have a good coping personality, I can tell just by talking with you. What's it been like dealing with your daughter, the nieces and nephews, and the kids? How are they taking all of this? Because it's a bit of a struggle. Kids are resilient, but how are they handling it? How are you as an adult kind of explaining it?
Well, one thing that's working for me is I'm a therapist, so
Okay,
that's why I can cope.
that works.
Yeah, I'm a therapist. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I'm doing just a lot of social emotional language with my daughter. She's 2. She says a lot. Our house has a lot of smoke, and she says Grandpa doesn't have a house anymore. And so my dad is showing her pictures of brand new houses that he wants to build. And same thing with my nieces and nephews. It's hard because we're used to seeing them every day. And so we haven't seen them in a couple weeks, so we miss them. So we've just been doing a lot of FaceTime videos and trying to do as much together as we can.
Yeah, it definitely presents a different landscape to work with when you're trying to do a natural disaster recovery. Since you've been through this experience, what advice would you give, A, to yourself if you could go back in time, but B, to other people after having been through this, things that you would have done that you hadn't thought of before that you think, now I'm definitely doing this from here on out to sort of protect yourself or get ready for a situation like this?
I think a few things. I think always try to have insurance. I think that's important. I think having your important documents together in one place that you can kind of grab on the go is also really important. And I also think like trusting your instinct. It's better to evacuate earlier with your things that, and save a few things. I think about the few things like at my dad's house that we'll never get back. That's kind of heartbreaking. So, if you see danger, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, take the precautions early. Yeah. I thought you made a really great recommendation too of just taking an inventory of your house or things that you have, because sometimes you just, especially if you're in a trauma of some sort of a natural disaster recovery, you may not remember all of the things, the books, the furniture, the whatever. And so taking an inventory, I think that is a really good piece of advice to give people. What have you learned from this experience as far as being in a neighborhood, being in a place that's familiar to you, and then having it all disappear? I mean, some people can lose a lot of hope in certain situations like that. What has it taught you?
Well, that most things can be replaced. There are a few things that, I think like my mom's ashes were in the house, and she had like a little Christmas village that she had painted that we put out every year for Christmas, and like my dad's trophies, those kinds of things have been lost. But that really, our family being safe is the most important thing. And I really realized how wonderful of a family that I have. Like everybody's just pitching in and checking on us, and you know, fundraising and really trying to make sure that we're okay. And I think that that's the most important thing. When something like this happens, like after a while, the cameras and kind of all the excitement around it goes away. But having the people that are closest to you around is invaluable.
Tell me a little bit. You mentioned the fundraising. I want to talk about the fundraising and the GoFundMe page because what was it like setting that up? What's the response been? Because some people, they may not have the means, they may not have as much to do, but even when you do have insurance, even when you do have, sometimes you need a little more help. Was it difficult to get that set up? What's been the response? And have you been able to share that a lot?
Yeah, so the insurance doesn't cover everything, and my brother and my sister-in-law and niece also live there, and so the insurance doesn't cover everything. My cousin Dana set up the GoFundMe a day or two after it happened, and we've had a very positive response to it. We're still promoting it and putting it out there, and we're very grateful for the response that we've had so far.
You're telling your story. Taiann, when you think about everybody else, I mean, it seems like everybody has a really dramatic story. Have you looked through the neighborhood, friends, family? I mean, Facebook and social media is one way to get some of the information, but what are some of the stories that you've heard as this has come through Southern California, in particular, the Eaton Fire area?
The thing that's so unique about Altadena is it has a very small town kind of community feel to it, and there's a lot of really beautiful stories. My neighbor who lives next to me, his two children lived on Mariposa, which is the same street my dad lived on, and their house burned. So they're going to be moving in next door with him. Like my hairdresser, her home burned. My daughter's daycare, the half of it has burned. But through that, there's been a lot of coming together. There's this one store in Altadena. It's an African artifacts and music store. And they do things in the community like one Sunday a month, they do fresh fruit Sundays where they have everybody pick fruit from their trees and come to the store and share and have like a free market. And they offer like drum classes and stuff like that for the community every Saturday and Sunday for the children. And their store burned down. And so they've been able to really, the next day they were organizing a free boutique to give away clothes. And they actually were one of the families that were chosen for the Grammys. To be in a commercial for the Grammys. And so they're making Altadena merchandise and really trying to come back from that. So there's a lot of like connection and hope along with the sadness and the devastation.
Is there anything else you would want people to know? Any other messages you'd want to get out and share about the fires, about the survivors, about what's happened in Southern California?
Yeah, I think that one thing that is not well known about Altadena is that it is a historically Black neighborhood. Altadena was one of the few places that there was a lot of Black homeowners. And so a lot of the loss that happened in Altadena is generational. So meaning people owned their houses and passed it down to like their children and their grandchildren. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of devastation from the fact that houses aren't as cheap or affordable anymore to buy. And some of the generational wealth will have been lost. So just keeping that in mind when we're thinking about Altadena specifically. And then, just awareness that, in tragedy, sometimes there can be people that take advantage. So,
Yes.
so just keeping that in mind when we're talking about Altadena and the people and what they're going through.
Those are really, really great points that you make. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, to tell us about your survival story, about your dad, his personality, and some of the ways that you guys have started to cope with this. I know it's going to be a long road to recovery, but really appreciate the time. We'll share the GoFundMe page and some of the
Thank
pictures
you.
and stuff of your family. But all the best wishes to you. Keep us posted. If your dad's not the first to rebuild, I know he'll be one of them, and
Yeah.
we'll look forward to his story for sure. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much
Thank
for
you.
being with us, Taiann Knetge. Thank you so much.
Thank you.